One of the more surprising results of Tuesday's election was the race for Broward County State Attorney, where Harold Pryor won the Democratic nomination and will almost certainly be the winner in November.
Pryor beat out a crowded field against candidates who had more money than he did and greater name recognition. This Sunday, Facing South Florida host Jim DeFede talks to Pryor, who explains how growing up in a rough and violent neighborhood shaped his run for office.
Growing up in that type of environment, I can only tell you from my life experience, you either succumb to the pressures that are around you, right? Or you decide that you're going to do something to change it. From the age of 14 all the way up until 2 years ago, I've lost friends and family members to gun violence. I lost a first cousin of mine to gun violence. He was brutally murdered. And another one of my cousins who was also with him, he was shot. He was in a coma for a few days and he came out and he recovered after a few months later. And so gun violence has decimated so many communities here in the state of Florida, but also in the country, and also given the Marjory Stoneman Douglas massacre. And so I've experienced that. I understand. I know what it feels like to go to a personal close friend's funeral or a loved one's funeral, and all due to the evils of gun violence. And so that's had a profound effect on me. It's had an effect on me in wanting to go to law school. I went to law school not to make money or be a high-powered attorney. It was actually to make a change. And so that was why I became a prosecutor. I learned very early on, from an early age all the way into law school, that prosecutors, state attorneys, have an incredible power. They have the power to decide sometimes life and death. They have the power to determine if someone can have a second or third chance. They have the power to determine if we're going to give children a second chance. They have an opportunity to eradicate the school-to-prison pipeline. And so my life experiences have influenced me all the way up until this point. And I think it's awesome, and I think it's great that we can have state attorneys that have that perspective, that have that little real-life perspective, that can bring it to the courtroom, that can bring it to the state attorney's office and impart that information upon the subordinates to ensure that we're initiating this ground-level criminal justice reform we're talking about, but also doing that without compromising the safety of our communities.
What was the impetus? What made you decide to get into this race?
It was a combination of a lot of things. It was a combination of my life experiences, what I talked about earlier, but also the events of Trayvon Martin, the issue of police brutality throughout the country, the mass incarceration issue that we've seen in this country, and not just the mass incarceration issue, but the sentencing disparities based on race. That had a profound effect on me. And I looked at the world around me. I looked at myself and saw that I had particular skill set and talents and gifts. And I just felt that I couldn't waste it in a time like this. I was compelled to get involved. I was compelled to throw my hat in the ring because everyone's talking about criminal justice reform, but not many have actually experienced it, and not many can do it responsibly like I can, and actually understand our communities and how we need to initiate that. When I served at the state attorney's office, I worked hard to ensure that I utilized my discretion and I utilized my common sense. I utilized sound reason and analytical skills to ensure that we had the right outcome in a particular case. I can say I went to sleep every night comfortably knowing that every day I did the right thing, or I pursued to do the right thing, and that justice was sought in every outcome. I often say, and I always said then as a prosecutor, that it wasn't about wins or losses when I took a case to trial. It was either guilty or not guilty. And sometimes justice is a not guilty verdict. Sometimes justice is a guilty verdict. Sometimes justice is us just outright dropping a case because the facts aren't there.
Now, there are some people who will listen to this, will hear what you're saying and think to themselves, that's not what I want in a state attorney. I want a state attorney who's looking for blood every day. I want a state attorney who's going to go in there and fight the bad guys in a way that will do, that will protect us, that will worry more about the victims than worrying about the rights of the criminals.
Well, I think that's a common misconception. I say this all the time. It doesn't matter where you grew up. It doesn't matter your walk of life, your race, color, gender, or creed. We all want safer communities, right? Let's be clear on that. Doesn't matter if you live in Lighthouse Point. Doesn't matter if you live in Fort Lauderdale, Pompano Beach, Sistrunk, what have you, Hollandale Beach. We all want safer communities. And so as an ex-state attorney, I acknowledge that we have a system that has been traditionally stacked against people of color and poor people. But also, we have to have a criminal justice system that comports with justice, fairness, and equality.
You can watch Jim DeFede's entire one-on-one interview with Harold Pryor Sunday on Facing South Florida. That's at 8:30 a.m.